There exists within the vast tapestry of human experience a phenomenon that has fascinated mystics, philosophers, and seekers of truth throughout all ages of recorded history. It is the phenomenon of the chosen one, the individual who walks a path that diverges from the well-trodden roads of collective existence. I have spent the better part of my life studying the depths of the human psyche, and in this exploration I have come to recognize that certain individuals bear unmistakable marks upon their souls, marks that distinguish them as carriers of a particular destiny, as vessels through which the unconscious seeks to manifest something greater than the ego alone could ever conceive. Now, when I speak of chosen ones, I do not speak of some divine election that places certain individuals above others in any hierarchical sense. The psyche does not operate according to such simplistic notions of superiority. Rather, what I refer to is a particular kind of calling, an inner summons that arises from the depths of the unconscious itself, demanding that certain individuals undertake the perilous journey of individuation with an intensity and commitment that goes far beyond the ordinary. These individuals are not chosen because they are better or more worthy. They are chosen because something within them will not allow them to live an unconscious life. They are compelled by forces within their own being to descend into the darkness of their own depths and to return transformed. The first mark that distinguishes such individuals is the persistent and often painful sense of being fundamentally different from others. From their earliest years, they experience a peculiar alienation, a feeling that they do not quite belong to the world into which they were born. They look upon the customs and conventions of their society and feel as though they are observing something foreign, something that does not resonate with the deepest currents of their being. This is not mere adolescent rebellion or the narcissistic fantasy of specialness that the ego so readily constructs to defend itself against feelings of inadequacy. No, this is something far more profound. It is the first stirring of the self, that totality of the psyche which transcends the narrow boundaries of the ego and encompasses all that we are and all that we might become. The child who bears this mark often experiences a profound loneliness, not because they lack companions or opportunities for connection, but because they sense that the connections available to them do not touch the depths where they truly live. They may have many friends, yet feel utterly alone. They may participate in all the activities of their peers, yet feel as though they are watching themselves from a great distance, playing a role in a drama whose meaning eludes them. This early experience of alienation is painful, yes, but it serves a crucial purpose. It prevents the individual from becoming too completely identified with the collective, from losing themselves entirely in the shared assumptions and unconscious patterns of their culture. The specific form of your journey is unique, but its essential structure is shared with all who have undertaken the great work of bringing consciousness to the unconscious, light to the darkness, wholeness to the fragmented soul. Take courage from this knowledge. Take courage from the countless others who have walked this path before you and survived, who have descended into their own depths and returned bearing gifts for all. Take courage from the certainty that what is unfolding in you is not random or meaningless, but is part of a purposive process guided by a wisdom far greater than any individual consciousness. And take courage from the simple fact that you are still here, still seeking, still open to what the psyche would reveal. The marks upon you are not wounds to be healed, but badges to be honored, not curses to be lifted, but blessings to be understood. They indicate that you have been entrusted with something precious, the task of becoming fully who you are meant to be. Rise to this task. Meet it with all the courage and devotion you can summon. The world needs what only you can give, what only you can become. And the self within you, patient and wise beyond all human understanding, stands ready to guide you home. It preserves within them a space of interiority, a sacred ground upon which the seeds of individuation may one day take root. The second mark is the presence of an unusually rich and vivid inner life, particularly in the realm of dreams. Those who are called to the deeper work of psychological transformation often experience dreams of extraordinary power and numinosity from an early age. These are not the ordinary dreams that merely process the residue of daily experience. These are visitations from the depths, messages from that vast ocean of the collective unconscious that lies beneath the thin surface of individual awareness. Such individuals may dream of strange lands and archetypal figures, of descents into underground realms, of encounters with wise old beings or terrifying monsters, of symbols whose meaning haunts them for years or even decades before they begin to understand. I recall patients who came to me with dreams that carried the unmistakable signature of the collective unconscious, dreams filled with mythological motifs and universal symbols that they could not possibly have encountered in their waking lives. These dreams were not pathological. They were invitations, summons from the psyche itself, calling the dreamer to attend to the inner world with the same seriousness and dedication that most people reserve only for external reality. The chosen ones are those who heed this call. They do not dismiss their dreams as mere nonsense or random firings of the brain. They sense, even before they possess the conceptual framework to articulate it, that their dreams are meaningful, that they carry messages from a wisdom far greater than the conscious mind alone could produce. The third mark is perhaps the most difficult to bear, for it involves the early and often brutal encounter with the shadow. The shadow, as I have described it, comprises all those specks of ourselves that we have repressed, denied, or refused to acknowledge. It is the dark brother or sister who walks behind us, containing all that we would prefer not to be. Most people manage to avoid any serious confrontation with their shadow for much of their lives. They project it onto others, seeing their own unacknowledged darkness in enemies, scapegoats, and those they condemn. But those who are chosen for the work of individuation do not have this luxury. The shadow rises up to meet them whether they seek it or not. Often this encounter comes through suffering, through experiences of failure, humiliation, or the breaking apart of carefully constructed identities. The young person who seemed destined for success may suddenly find themselves cast down, forced to confront aspects of themselves they had never imagined. The one who prided themselves on their virtue may discover, to their horror, that they are capable of thoughts and impulses that they had attributed only to the basest of humanity. These experiences are devastating to the ego, which would much prefer to maintain its illusions of goodness and competence. But to the self, which orchestrates these encounters with a wisdom the ego cannot comprehend, such experiences are necessary initiations. They shatter the false self so that the true self may eventually emerge. The chosen ones are those who, when confronted with their shadow, do not simply flee back into denial. They find within themselves the courage to look upon their own darkness, to acknowledge it, and ultimately to integrate it. This integration does not mean acting out the shadow or becoming the negative qualities one discovers within oneself. It means accepting that these qualities exist, that they are part of one's totality, and that they carry energies which, when properly understood and channeled, can become sources of strength and creativity. The artist who can paint the darkness has looked upon their own shadow. The healer who can sit with another's pain has descended into their own depths of suffering. The wise guide who can navigate others through crisis has survived their own encounters with chaos and destruction. The fourth mark is the experience of profound and often prolonged periods of solitude. I do not speak merely of physical isolation, though this too may be part of it. I speak of a solitude of the spirit, a withdrawal from the constant chatter and distraction of collective existence into a silence where the voice of the unconscious can finally be heard. The modern world, with its endless noise and stimulation, makes such solitude increasingly rare and increasingly necessary. Those who are called to the deeper work find that they require periods of retreat, times when they step back from the demands of social life to attend to the inner process that is unfolding within them. This solitude is not depression, though it may sometimes be mistaken for it. It is not the withdrawal of one who has given up on life or lost all interest in the world. It is the retreat of one who must consolidate inner gains, process profound experiences, and prepare for the next stage of the journey. The caterpillar, before it becomes a butterfly, must wrap itself in a cocoon and surrender to a process of dissolution and reformation that cannot occur in the midst of ordinary activity. So, too, must the human being who is undergoing genuine psychological transformation find times and spaces of protected solitude where the deep work can proceed undisturbed. Those who bear this mark often struggle against it. The ego resists solitude, for in solitude its defenses begin to weaken, and material from the unconscious begins to surface. The ego would prefer distraction, activity, anything to avoid the encounter with deeper layers of the psyche. But the self will not be denied. It arranges circumstances that force the individual into solitude, whether through illness, loss, or simply an irresistible pull away from external engagement. The chosen ones learn to recognize these periods not as punishments or failures, but as necessary retreats, essential phases in the ongoing rhythm of psychological development. The fifth mark is the experience of synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that defy all rational explanation, yet carry an unmistakable sense of significance. I developed the concept of synchronicity to describe what occurs when events in the external world correspond meaningfully with psychological states or processes in the inner world, without any causal connection between them. A person is thinking of an old friend they have not seen in years, and at that very moment the telephone rings, and it is that friend calling. Someone is wrestling with a difficult decision, and they open a book at random to find words that speak directly to their situation. These experiences, dismissed by the scientifically minded as mere coincidence, are recognized by those who are awakening to the deeper dimensions of existence as signs of a profound interconnection between psyche and world. Those who are marked for the journey of individuation often experience synchronicities with unusual frequency and intensity. It is as though the unconscious, unable to reach them through ordinary channels, begins to communicate through the arrangement of external events. I have seen this again and again in my analytical work. A patient reaches a critical point in their inner development, and suddenly the outer world begins to mirror their inner state with uncanny precision. Symbols from their dreams appear in waking life. People who carry projections of their archetypal images suddenly enter their lives. Books, conversations, events all seem to conspire to communicate a single message that is precisely what the psyche needs at that moment. The ability to perceive and respond to synchronicities is itself a mark of psychological development. The ordinary consciousness, trapped in its assumptions of linear causality and random chance, cannot see these connections. It dismisses them or fails to notice them altogether. But as consciousness expands and the individual becomes more attuned to the symbolic dimension of existence, synchronicities become increasingly apparent and increasingly meaningful. They become guides on the journey, signs that indicate whether one is on the right path or has strayed from it, confirmations that the work one is doing in the inner world is having effects in the outer world as well. The sixth mark is an unquenchable thirst for truth and self-knowledge, a drive toward understanding that cannot be satisfied by the easy answers and comfortable illusions that suffice for most people. Those who carry this mark are tormented by questions that others never think to ask. They cannot accept inherited beliefs simply because they are traditional or popular. They must test everything against their own experience, must descend into the depths to discover what they themselves truly think and feel and know. This drive can make them difficult companions, for they have little patience for pretense or superficiality, and they tend to see through the masks that people wear with uncomfortable clarity. This thirst for truth is not intellectual curiosity, though it may include that. It is a fundamental orientation of the being, a commitment to reality over illusion, no matter what the cost, and the cost can be considerable. To pursue truth means to abandon cherished beliefs when they prove false. It means to acknowledge uncomfortable realities about oneself and others. It means to stand alone when the crowd rushes off in pursuit of the latest collective delusion. It means to endure the loneliness of seeing what others refuse to see, of knowing what others refuse to know. Yet those who are truly called to this path cannot do otherwise. They are driven by a force within them that will not allow them to rest content with lies, no matter how comfortable those lies might be. This drive toward truth eventually turns inward, becoming the drive toward self-knowledge that I have called the central task of the second half of life. To know oneself truly is perhaps the most difficult achievement possible for a human being. It requires confronting not only the shadow, but the entire complex architecture of the psyche, the various sub-personalities and complexes that operate within us, the archetypal patterns that shape our lives without our knowledge, the fundamental assumptions about reality that we absorbed so early in life that we take them for reality itself rather than recognizing them as constructions. This work is never finished. The psyche is inexhaustible in its depths, and each layer of self-knowledge reveals further layers waiting to be explored. But those who are called to this work find in it a satisfaction that nothing else can provide. They would rather know themselves imperfectly than remain forever strangers to their own being. The seventh and perhaps most crucial mark is the experience of profound suffering and the transformation that arises from it. I want to be very clear about what I mean here. I am not suggesting that suffering is good in itself or that one should seek it out. Suffering that merely crushes without transforming is tragic, not redemptive. But there is a particular kind of suffering that serves as a crucible for psychological transformation, a dark night of the soul through which the individual must pass if they are to emerge renewed and more whole than before. Those who are chosen for the deeper work almost invariably encounter this suffering. It is as though the self requires it as the price of admission to higher levels of consciousness and integration. This transformative suffering often takes the form of a complete breakdown of the ego's constructed world. Everything that the individual had believed in, had built their identity upon, had counted on for security and meaning, falls apart. Career, relationships, health, faith, all may crumble simultaneously, leaving the individual stripped of everything they had thought themselves to be. This is the experience that the mystics call the dark night, the alchemists call the nigredo, the first stage of the great work in which all that is inessential must be burned away. It is terrifying, agonizing, and absolutely necessary. The chosen ones are distinguished not by being spared this suffering, but by their capacity to endure it without being destroyed. They find within themselves, or are given by grace, the strength to survive when survival seems impossible. And more than merely survive, they eventually discover that the destruction was in service of something greater. What dies in the dark night is the false self, the collection of masks and roles and defenses that the ego had mistaken for its true identity. What emerges, slowly and painfully, is something more authentic, more whole, more deeply connected to the self and to life. I have accompanied many individuals through this process, and I can say with certainty that there is no shortcut, no way to avoid the suffering while still receiving its fruits. The transformation requires the death of what must die, and this death is experienced as real death by the ego that is undergoing it. But on the other side, for those who can endure, lies a life more vibrant, more meaningful, more deeply rooted in reality than anything the old self could have imagined. This is the promise that the psyche holds out to those it has chosen, not a life free of difficulty, but a life in which difficulty serves the purposes of growth. Not happiness in the superficial sense, but a profound satisfaction that arises from living in alignment with one's deepest nature and highest possibilities. As I come to the conclusion of these reflections, I want to speak directly to those who recognize themselves in what I have described. If you have read these words and found in them a mirror of your own experience, then you are likely among those who are called to the deeper work of individuation. This calling is both a privilege and a burden. It sets you apart from the comfortable masses who can live their lives on the surface, never troubled by the stirrings of the depths. But it also opens to you possibilities of meaning and fulfillment that those who remain unconscious can never know. Do not imagine that being chosen in this sense makes you superior. The unconscious chooses whom it chooses according to criteria that remain mysterious even to those of us who have spent our lives studying it. Some who are called were prepared by their early sufferings. Others seem to have been born with a particular sensitivity to the inner world. Still others are awakened by experiences later in life that shatter their former certainties and force them to seek a deeper foundation. Whatever the cause of your calling, your task now is not to congratulate yourself on being special, but to respond to the summons with the courage and dedication it demands. The path of individuation is not for the faint of heart. You will be required to face aspects of yourself that you would much prefer to deny. You will pass through periods of darkness and confusion when you cannot see your way forward. You will be misunderstood by those who have not undergone similar experiences, and you may often feel utterly alone. But you will also discover treasures beyond price. You will experience moments of clarity and connection that reveal the profound meaning hidden within existence. You will develop a relationship with your own depths that becomes a source of guidance and wisdom throughout your life. And you will contribute to the great work of human evolution by bringing more consciousness into a world that desperately needs it. The marks I have described are not badges of honor to be displayed, but signs to be understood. They indicate that you have been selected for a particular kind of life, one devoted to the expansion of consciousness and the integration of the personality. They do not guarantee success in this endeavor. Many who are called stumble and fall. Many retreat back into unconsciousness when the difficulties become too great. The marks only indicate potential, a seed that has been planted within you that may or may not come to fruition depending on how you tend it. My final word to you is this: trust the process that is unfolding within you, even when it leads you through darkness and suffering. The self knows what it is doing, even when the ego cannot comprehend. The symptoms of your calling, the sense of alienation, the vivid inner life, the encounters with shadow, the necessary solitudes, the meaningful coincidences, the drive toward truth, the transformative sufferings, all of these are signs that you are being shaped for a purpose greater than your ego can conceive. Your task is not to direct this process, but to cooperate with it, to remove the obstacles that your own resistance places in its way, and to trust that the destination toward which you are being led is worthy of the journey required to reach it. The chosen ones of every age have walked this path before you. They have left their marks in myth and legend, in art and philosophy, in the great spiritual traditions of humanity. You walk in their footsteps now, adding your own contribution to the endless human quest for wholeness and meaning. May you have the courage to continue when the way grows dark. May you have the wisdom to recognize the guidance that comes from within. And may you have the faith to trust that what is unfolding in you is part of a pattern far greater and more beautiful than any individual life could contain. The work of individuation is the work of becoming who you truly are. It is the most important work any human being can undertake, and it is the work to which you have been called. Accept this calling with humility and determination. The path awaits. There is another dimension to this matter that I must address before we part. Those who bear these marks often wonder why they were chosen, why this burden and this gift fell upon them rather than upon others. It is a natural question, and yet it proceeds from a misunderstanding of how the psyche operates. The unconscious does not choose according to merit or worthiness in any conventional sense. It chooses according to its own mysterious purposes, purposes that often only become clear in retrospect, if they become clear at all. What I can say, after decades of observing this phenomenon, is that those who are chosen tend to possess a certain quality of psychological permeability. They are porous to the unconscious in a way that others are not. The barriers between conscious and unconscious, which in most people are thick and well defended, are thinner in these individuals. This permeability is both their greatest vulnerability and their greatest gift. It makes them sensitive to currents that others cannot feel. It gives them access to wisdom that others cannot reach. But it also exposes them to dangers from which others are protected by their very unconsciousness. The thin boundary between conscious and unconscious means that material from the depths can erupt into awareness with disturbing force and frequency. Archetypal energies that in most people remain safely buried can surge up and overwhelm the ego. This is why so many of those who are called to the deeper work struggle with what the world calls mental illness. The visions that in another era might have been recognized as shamanic experiences are now labeled as symptoms and medicated into silence. I do not say this to romanticize madness or to suggest that genuine mental illness should go untreated. But I do say that the modern psychiatric framework often fails to recognize the initiatory nature of certain psychological crises. It cannot distinguish between a breakdown that is merely pathological and a breakdown that is the beginning of a breakthrough. Those who are truly chosen learn to navigate these dangerous waters. They develop what I have called a strong ego, not in the sense of an inflated or dominant ego, but in the sense of an ego that is stable enough to encounter the tremendous energies of the unconscious without being swept away. This strong ego is built through practice, through the gradual and disciplined exposure to unconscious material in forms that can be integrated. Dream work, active imagination, creative expression, the careful analysis of one's own complexes and projections, all of these practices strengthen the ego's capacity to relate to the unconscious without being overwhelmed by it. I think also of the role that relationships play in this process. The chosen ones often struggle with relationships precisely because they cannot be satisfied with the superficial connections that suffice for others. They long for a meeting of depths, a communion of souls that transcends the ordinary negotiations of social life. When they do find such relationships, whether with a friend, a lover, a teacher, or a therapist, these connections become crucibles for transformation. The other person serves as a mirror in which they can see aspects of themselves that would otherwise remain invisible. They serve as an anchor that keeps the individual connected to consensual reality even as they explore the furthest reaches of the inner world. Yet many of those who are called spend long periods without such relationships, and this too serves a purpose. The absence of external mirrors forces them to develop the capacity for self-reflection. The absence of external anchors forces them to find their own center. The loneliness that they experience is painful, but it is also productive. It drives them inward toward a relationship with the self that ultimately becomes more important than any external relationship could be. Those who have cultivated this inner relationship are capable of a quality of presence in their outer relationships that is rare and precious. They can be truly with another because they have first learned to be truly with themselves. I want to speak also of the relationship between those who are chosen and the collective, the society in which they live. There is often tension in this relationship, for the chosen ones see things that the collective would prefer to leave unseen. They speak truths that the collective would prefer to leave unspoken. They embody possibilities that the collective finds threatening to its established order. In traditional societies, there were roles for such individuals. They became shamans, healers, artists, prophets. They were recognized as serving a necessary function, holding open a door to the transcendent that the collective needed, even if it feared what lay beyond that door. Modern society has largely lost these roles. The chosen ones today often find themselves without a place, without a recognized function, without a container for their unusual gifts and experiences. They may drift from job to job, relationship to relationship, seeking a fit that they never quite find, or they may squeeze themselves into conventional roles that do not truly suit them, living lives of quiet desperation while their depths cry out for expression. This is one of the tragedies of our time. The waste of human potential that occurs when a society has no place for its visionaries and seers. And yet, despite all these difficulties, the chosen ones persist. They persist because they must. The calling that moves them is stronger than any obstacle the world can place in their path. They persist because something in the Shamba knows, even when the mind doubts, that the work they are doing matters. They are engaged in the evolution of consciousness itself, pushing forward the boundaries of what human beings can know and be and experience. Each chosen one who successfully navigates the journey of individuation adds something to the collective psyche, makes something newly possible for all of humanity. This is perhaps the deepest meaning of being chosen. It is not about personal salvation or individual achievement, though these may come. It is about serving something larger than oneself, contributing to a process that transcends any individual life. The chosen ones are the growing edge of humanity, the pioneers who explore territories of the psyche that others will one day inhabit. Their struggles and discoveries become part of the collective inheritance available to all who come after. So if you recognize these marks upon yourself, know that you are not alone, even in your loneliness. You are part of a lineage that stretches back to the beginning of human consciousness and forward to whatever humanity is becoming. You walk a path that has been walked before and will be walked again,